Architecture is where we exist. Whether we think about it consciously or not, we are in constant sensory dialogue with our surroundings. The great architects have mastered the art of making us feel in a space. In this video, I want to talk about commemorative landscapes, how architects and artists design for grief, particularly at the level of community and society, what it means to grieve as a part of a larger group, and how it is different from individual grief. Then, we will look at a few works in order to understand how they translate this intangible feeling into something tangible and maybe even healing. Let's talk about grief a bit first. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines it as a deep and poignant distress caused by or as if by bereavement. But grief is much more expansive than that and has many different types. It's a response to any sense of loss, be it a person or a job or a relationship. It's a result of a breakdown of the expected sense of safety in an environment. Our minds in these times may behave in seemingly unexpected, unreasonable ways. The well-known book On Death and Dying by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler talks about grief as a 5-stage process. There are other models as well, but these 5 stages are most commonly cited in the context of grief. These include denial, anger, bargain, depression, and acceptance. It is important to note here that these stages may not occur in the order they are listed, and some people may not experience some of the stages at all. Let's talk about community and grieving a bit. Sometimes we are faced with such harrowing instances in our society that our foundation as a community, as a part of a larger people, is shaken to the core. The Bhopal gas tragedy on the night of December 2, 1982, killing thousands in the sleep and tens of thousands more subsequently, is one such instance that drastically shook us and our trust in the system. The year 2020, with people losing their lives, livelihoods, the freedom to go outside, to see one's loved ones, has been a year of collective grief at the global level. While there is no escaping the flood of emotions that we have to deal with at the individual level, there is some semblance in knowing that others around us understand. In many traditions, grieving has been a process shared by the community, with rituals that would reinforce the bonds amongst the people. However, in today's increasingly individualistic and heterogeneous world, these rituals that would guide our response to such griefs are undergoing a decline. People have no handbook to try to understand, make sense of, and channel the overwhelming emotions they may be feeling. The book Bereavement, Reactions, Consequences and Care talks about how there is a standardization of the event of death. It says that the rise and the rule of the rational bureaucratic efficiency in modern society are clearly evident in what Bronner calls the bureaucratization of modern death control. Until recently, care of the dying as well as death itself took place in home. Today, modern bureaucratic institutions, for the most part, not only remove death from the home, but have also effectively concealed many aspects of death and dying from patients and their families. One consequence is that the survivors are less well equipped to deal with the aftermath of death. What architecture can offer a community, I think, is acknowledgement that the loss was not in vain, and that all of us are in this together. With a space dedicated to the collective loss of a community, it asks one to remember, and therefore strive to be better. That what you do with your life matters, even after years of you turning into dust. You are standing here in this space, it clearly matters. So when a tragedy strikes people, we have a space to remember them, to acknowledge that they mattered, and lives should not have been lost, to know we could have done better, and to ascertain that we should do better from here on. It offers space for a kind of introspection that doesn't often happen in the rhythm of our day-to-day lives. Let's talk about commemorative landscapes now. Commemorative landscapes defined by Cultural Landscape Foundation. A landscape set aside and marked by a culture to recall, celebrate, honor, or memorialize significant people, places, ideas, or events in history. Such landscapes can be designed vernacular, ethnographic, or historic and range in form and scale from single object to a panoramic viewshed. Burial grounds and cemeteries were among the earliest and most iconic forms of public commemorative landscapes. Other examples include battlefields, presidential sites, gardens, ceremonial sites, and memorials. Together, these places form an important physical expression of a culture's shared memories. A landscape needs to be activated for the interpretation and commemoration of important events. It involves curating the spatial experience in a way so as to generate a certain feeling and reaction among the people. In order to understand how commemorative landscapes have evoked emotions among people and triggered their collective memories, let us look at a few case studies. The landscapes I talk about here are very sculptural in nature. They are not just symbols of commemoration but also an experience of the same. The memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe, designed by architect Peter Eisenman and sculptor Richard Serra. The site consists of 2,711 grey-colored concrete slabs of varying heights, having small, narrow paths to traverse between them. They are a symbolic representation of graves and therefore signify death. The lower height slabs are used playfully by children and as seats by tourists. But as you go in further, the heights of the slabs increase and the alleyways seem to get narrower, giving an almost claustrophobic sensation. This acts as a metaphor for how a misfortune struck the happiness of the Jews. In fact, the memorial is placed in the heart of the city, showcasing its significance. The concrete floor is uneven, giving the users a feel of uncertainty. A dramatic effect has been created in landscape for the purpose of commemoration. The second landscape is the Gran Creto in Sicily, where in January 1968 an earthquake destroyed 14 towns. The people rebuilt a new town on a site 20 km away from the devastated town of Ghibellina. So, a landscape was created by artist Alberto Burri in the existing damaged site of Ghibellina in order to commemorate the devastating event. Enlarged to the huge scale of the existing landscape, the Gran Creto is in ways a representation to the disaster. The ruined plots were covered with concrete blocks almost 1.6 meters high. The streets were marked by gaps between these blocks that act as alleyways. So the whole landscape appears cracked, signifying what the earthquake did to the dwellings and other built structures in Ghibellina. The memorial involves a level of complexity in movement across space. The space allows the people to navigate within the fissures of the landscape. In both of the above cases, the boundaries between the landscape and sculpture have been blurred. In itself, the landscape acts as a sculptural element which also allows people to move through and experience it. What it is points to what no longer is.